we get.
All right, so we're live now. Good evening, everybody. It's Dustin Coiner here from TrackDaz on the West Coast, and I'm on with Fred from iOneMoto, and he's on the East Coast. He's like he's the bodywork dude. So you know what? Welcome, Fred. The first question I have to ask you on behalf of all racers, where the hell is my bodywork?
Oh, yeah. I get that pretty regularly. First, Dustin, I appreciate you taking me. Yeah, I'm the bodywork guy, I guess you could say. We do a little bit more than just bodywork, but the majority is bodywork. Well, these days it's about 4 to 5 weeks out. We're pretty much built to order on everything. The number one question I get is, why don't you have inventory? And the number one answer I give is, we build approximately 5,000 individual units a year. Now,
really?
that's not full kits, but 5,000 different parts. And we do very little private stuff, but mostly of all that. So during the off seasons is when you were to, go full bore, just build. I've got 5 or 6 laminators that are working full time every day, all year round. And whenever we do build inventory, it's usually at the slower parts. But the last few years, our flow season has gone smaller and smaller and smaller. So unfortunately, the only way I do is by adding a laminator, and it takes about 9 months to get somebody from start to finish.
Yeah.
So hard to add. You can't just exponentially be like, here, I'm going to hire 3 people and then make 5,000 more parts. You got to wait. You hire one, and 9 months later, you can hire another one. So the old Sharkskins, right, when it first started, had a slow buildup. So every year, add one, fine. And when they were at the top of their game back then, they were able to push it out. We're not in small little manufacturing with some mice and overseas, and you just shove a ton of people and throw it together. It's too hands-on with the process.
Right. And so basically, the short answer is you just can't make it fast enough to stock it.
No, I'd love to. Trust me. We are making some huge changes. In the last 5 years, we got rid of street stuff because we just couldn't be competitive with the China product lines that are coming in. And we had the opportunity, but if you do $20,000 a year worth of that product line, how much other body work could we have made? And I made the executive decision that, we were losing too much opportunity was gone. And we didn't even notice it when it disappeared. Yeah, some people were upset, and of course, it's the day you take it offline that people go, "Hey, I see you don't have it anymore. Can you still build it?" And then in the last year, we've been kind of like refocusing our whole plan of attack, and a lot of the pre-2000 stuff is starting to go away. It's just the info's not there anymore. The interest is not there, and to be honest, we've grown so much in the last 5 years that I just don't have the room. So I either go build a building or buy a bigger building, and I'm not quite sure what the next couple of years have in front of us, right? Or we make some room. And I think the investing in carbon fiber is far more important than keeping some 1997 bodywork, or with the YZF 750 stuff that it's cool, but nobody's racing it, and we can't keep a set of molds for one person.
Yeah, there's those 5 guys in Arma that race that bike, and they probably have spares.
Yeah, and I feel bad because I'm an Arma guy with sidecar racing, but at the end of the day, I just threw away all the Honda RS 125 and 250 molds. We're doing the last set for one guy, and then we're done. There's just not enough out there.
You know what? I have a guy that asked a question earlier today, and I was saving it for later, but this kind of ties into what you just said. He's like, why did the Hawk R1 kit disappear? I don't even know what that is. Like, what is it? The Honda Hawk with an R1 shape to it or something? What is that?
So that's a little before, obviously, I owned it, but yeah, if I remember right, it was a R1 shape on the Hawk. And funny enough, I actually think I still have parts of the molds. I haven't finished the Honda or reorganization. One call in 5 years. It's hard to do it. The bigger challenge is molds, they can degrade, right? So if it sits there, it's cool. Yeah, we can replicate it, but if we pull it out of storage and put it into work, we find ourselves taking twice as long because you got to clean it, you got to reseal it, you got to re-wax it, you got to hope that the person who's building it knows how they're going to build it. And usually they get messed up a little bit because the older they are, a little bit different type of work. And at the end, we just find ourselves losing money. And I'm not a museum, right? And I'd love to be the guy who everybody comes, but if there's a calling for it, we keep it, right? Like we have some older Ducati stuff we'll never get rid of.
Like you should sell those old molds to Barber. They'd probably use it.
So funny, I had somebody ask me today about some older molds, and I said, you know what? I don't even feel right to sell them. Like they're so destroyed. I mean, we have some molds that are so destroyed that every time I cringe every time we get an order. I'm like, oh my God, can we just get rid of it, right? And look, I think you would agree, we want as many motorcycles out there. So if you come in with a 2001 R1, like we still have them, we'll build them. But when you come in with a 1996 something, it's getting harder, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, there's not very many people racing those anymore.
No, and the funny thing, obviously we do road racing, which obviously you and I are well in tuned in that. In drag racing, though, they're a little different. Bikes don't start right away. So, for example, the 2017 GSXR 1000, like we did all this stuff for it, but it didn't start like booming until beginning of 2020. They wait for the bike to kind of come out, get a little cheaper, buy it used, and they're guys racing 2005 GSXR 1000s, and the Busa, the 99 Gen 1 Busa is still the hottest platform. I mean, they're taking, I think, Gen 1 motors and putting them in Gen 2 frames, and now with the new Gen 3 coming out, like it's pretty radical the disparity, the differences between the two organizations. Like I have to wrap my head around it, and some people don't get it. Like I'm not a drag racer. I respect it because those guys, when somebody calls and asks me a question, drag racing, I can guide you, right? I can get you, or I know the person will have the answer. But those guys never ask for directions, and they're all right with things being a little off because they're hacking and putting things on, and they're just trying to go as fast as they can for the shortest amount of time.
Right.
If something blows off, they're more worried about stopping than anything else.
That's stuff that we road racer guys, at least most of us, can't take. Like I work a lot with Richard Stamboli, and I mean, like he has a saying that good enough's not good enough, and
sure, I
really believe that. And but yeah, I've seen some of the drag race stuff. Wires hanging out in weird places and dryer ducting and
there's the same thing in road racing, right? Like there's there's the pro guys, right? And then there's the amateurs, and then there's the guys who just want to be in there, right?
Yeah.
The key is like there is a complete different world. Now those guys will take a tank from one bike and a tail from another bike, and they're looking for a look. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't put a 05 GSXR tail on a race bike that's a 1000 today, right? Like that just doesn't happen. But the nice thing is they pick more platforms and they stick with it, right? Where when a new road race bike comes out, it's like, oh my God, I gotta get this thing right away because oh my God, right? And they want all the good fast bits, and there's some people don't. It's not this. What a lot of people don't realize is Bodywork is not like done. Like it takes time, and so iOneMoto, obviously the Sharkskins brand, we do everything old school. Like it's still all hand shaped. It's still pitch podging, getting the shape, and then we're super Nazi when it comes to it fitting right, and we're just starting right now to do the computer and the electronics thing, and we're trying to integrate it so we can get more stuff out. But it takes time, man. Like to do a set of molds right, you can cut corners and cut things in half, but then things don't fit like some of my competitors, right? And that's all right. We don't compete with some of the real, some of those guys, right? Like, we don't make them in Mexico. We don't make them in China or Canada. Like, they're here.
Not naming names.
No. Hey, there's plenty of them, right? There's also Europe. But more importantly, like, we're building it here, but, we can't, if we take a shortcut because of our pricing, we're screwed, right? Like, we need to bring out the best, right? And
right.
Sharkskins, Catalyst is one thing, but Sharkskins has paved the way for many, many years. Like the rivet marks where you drill, that was invented by Sharkskins. The rest picked it up. The gray primer at one point was white primer. People would change colors just because Sharkskins would.
Actually, at one point, I can remember it being pink.
Yeah. And you know what?
Yeah.
People were trying to find it, and they did it on purpose. At one point, it was just a supply issue. The original owners, they couldn't get it anymore, and we're kind of running into that issue today. Like, right now, with all the shipping issues and the raw material problems, like, we've got to be creative, right? Fortunately, like, while it kills me, I've went in and bought every piece of fiberglass I can get my hands on that meets our spec, because if we don't, then we shut down, and then nobody has Bodywork, right? The same with the paints, because of last year's shutdowns, and this isn't just polyester, vinyl esters, epoxy, not so much, but the poly and vinyl ester world really got hit hard. But a lot of paints are based off of that type of chemistry. And, there are boat companies right now that are taking orders, but can't even build because they can't get the resins. Fortunately, compared to some of my competitors, we didn't have that problem. And I had the foresight to buy as much as I could. But it doesn't help, like, overall, all the things we're dealing with, it shows, and it happened in the past. So it was pink, it's been white, it's been gray. We like white because white as a base coat is pretty good. But, tomorrow it could be black, because if we can't get it in gray, we'll have to move over. And we've done black in the past. Some racing organizations like it because they just throw some stickers on it and go. Right. I think Apex Manufacturing, they had the special request, can you do it in black? It's like, yeah, and now it costs a lot more to do it in black, but we can do it.
So we kind of got going pretty quickly, and I kind of wanted to do like a little full disclosure, like,
do it up.
Fred's not sponsoring me or the TrackDaz program. Like, we're literally just two industry dudes talking crap. Fair enough?
Yeah, I think we should put a little thing up here that says, FYI, we are not sponsoring.
Yeah, but everybody's a sponsor, right? You just give them, all the racers, like 15% off, right?
You know what? I wish I could. At the end of the day, that's probably the most common question, and some people can pull it off. I like to preface that with, it's a great joke, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to make a living and pay a bunch of people, obviously. But yeah, no. Hey, racers, we want the discounts. Hey, I'll give a secret. I'm the worst. When I was racing before Tight Tails, before Sharkskins, Catalyst SE, and all that, I always asked for a deal, right? But when somebody said no, I just went with it, right? I'm more of a set it and forget it, and I'm more of a buy it and keep buying it, right? So at the time, I think you might know them. I dealt with Brad from Superbike Supply, which is now defunct. I think it's actually been like, someone kind of wanted to build it. I think it was John McKnone, and then somebody else has now done it. But yeah, I when I was racing before any of this, I called that guy up and I said, here, I know at one point I was spending more money than most with him. I was doing well, and hey, okay, that's what you say. Cool, just do it and make it happen. Boom. I didn't go look too far. You always ask, but then you go, all right, hey, cool. I know you have to make a living, right? You got to go on, you got to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I've been around for a while, so I can go back to the '90s doing the AirTech gray line stuff, right?
All right, yeah.
It was like $400 for a set, and the one thing about it, it was super cheap and it looked okay. The painter kind of hated us, and we had to custom drill it.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And then the
painter
to the left. It was like the prep work on that stuff was horrible. One of my guys, Gil Ramos, like he's kind of a pool guy. Like he's one of those jack of all trades dudes. And like he painted this stuff in another friend's driveway, and it was like fisheye city.
Yeah, a large part of fish eyes is two things. It's either the whatever they're using to make sure the part comes out of the mold, but also if it's a polyester gel coat, if it's not prepped right enough, it'll just fish eye everywhere. And then you got a painter cursing behind because they didn't do the prep work, which is the most important part.
Yeah,
90% of it's prep.
It was exactly what you said. It was like fisheye everywhere. It actually kind of looked cool from far away, but that's about it. And
a lot of body work looks cool from far away. It's when you get close that it, there's
so that stuff, that gray line stuff, as soon as it hit the ground, it basically exploded, right? So into like 1,000 pieces. So do you want to talk
not fast,
about,
right? You're talking like fell at 5 miles an hour and exploded, right? Okay, maybe not 5, 10, 15.
Are you calling me slow, dude?
No, not at all. Maybe a scooter would be better for you. But I think in the end of the day, it doesn't, like that stuff would explode, right? It just pop into a million pieces. Didn't matter how fast you were going.
Right. Yeah, I mean the stuff would. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like the process that you go through to make your stuff that makes your stuff not do that? Like what kind of materials are used in that lesser expensive stuff to cause that? Because it's a thing.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that the recipe is key, right? So Sharkskins has been whittling and developing and has found, and we've had to change over the years because you can't get the stuff right sometimes. But we use glass. All right. There's two types of glass, really, E-glass and S-glass. S-glass is really structural and it's really expensive, but it's actually stronger than a lot of different things. If I remember right, it's stronger than carbon. There's some fallacies and things that people don't understand with them, but we use E-glass, like the majority, a twill of some sorts. But it's, I like to explain it as, or maybe you don't know. I don't know if you wear a dress shirt, right? But when people get their dress shirts pressed and cleaned, there's the starch, right?
Right.
And in the fiberglass world, there is a starchish material. I can't remember the exact naming convention for it. It won't really matter, and I can't divulge it. But we get our glass with a very, very specific starch, which allows us to do what we do. And there's tons of ways to skin the cat. You got 2x2 twill, you got plain weave. A lot of it is what people don't realize is in the composites world, bodywork for motorcycles is super complex. A boat, flat, long, complex because it's just big, but bodywork is really hard. So you have to be able to do corners. You have to be able to have it basically, you're thinking about it, it's doing this, right?
Crazy sharp edges.
Yeah, gravity's working against you. You got heat, you got time limits, like resins only last for so long mixed. So the recipe, the Sharkskins recipe, is based off of the fabric that is literally the starting point, and then the resin system. So we're very fortunate. We have an epoxy resin system that was developed for aerospace. It's been around for a long time. We are probably one of 2 or 3 people that still use it. It is used for building fuel, like large fuel tanks for airplanes. It's been around for a long time, and it's getting harder and harder to get. And I'm about this close to hiring a chemist to then manufacture it myself because I want to insure it for the future. But that's what gives us like the true recipe, like the ability to crash and maintain, not explode into a million pieces. Now, some of the new resin systems, which we play around with every time, if it's a cold day and you build it and you don't build it in a certain amount of time, it will explode because the chemical bond you're looking for doesn't work, or it works so well that it didn't work on a mechanical side, right? So there is a point where you can't lay parts together anymore. You get a chemical bond. So what you have to do, you have to score it. You know, like when you're a kid working with clay and you scored it and you kind of put it together. Same conceptual idea. So it's the recipe and the raw materials, and nobody in the industry uses what we use. Like, not a single one of them. And a lot of it comes from the previous owner and what he used to do, and then, you know, playing around with it. I like to use this as an expression. You guys are all composite experts. You guys are probably better composite experts than I am. A peanut butter and jelly sandwich is a composite. So when somebody asked me how you do it, I said, how you make a sandwich? That's the same thing. We take two materials, put them together, the peanut butter and the jelly, and then we put the bread together, and boom, you got Bodywork.
Yeah, I mean, I was unfortunate enough to early on. This is years ago. You're
dating yourself.
That's okay. I don't care. I'm cool with that. Like, I've earned that. I've earned those scars. All right.
Yeah, the gray hairs.
I don't.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, no gray hairs. No gray hair. But you know, I worked with AK Composite back in the day. They're now gone, and I had a habit of wadding up motorcycles. And one day, the guy that ran the thing was like, "Dude, you need to come over here. If you want another set of bodywork, you got to come over here and make it yourself, because it's a pain in the ass."
Yeah.
And then I never had a problem buying bodywork ever again, because I was like, dude, I got through the lower fairing, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm out.
So I believe that was what Attack was running or was helped develop. I believe it changed names. This is beyond my time. I have heard of this bodywork. Was it a Chopmat or was it a weave?
It was matte, and it was just a mat that you'd lay down. And this is before Attack kind of took that brand over.
Yeah.
And I think Richard sent the bodywork to Thailand, I think, and then
whatever happened, right?
Yeah. Like, it's been over a decade, so I'm sure he'll laugh at it too. So,
I think we had talked, me and him and I, yes. Stramboli and myself had talked about for probably a 2-second span, and that was it once a couple of years ago when I was in the middle of construction of my shop. But Chopmat, right, it's even easier because you're just kind of throwing shit in. You know?
Oh yeah, you throw the mat down, and then he had a system, and I was like, and it was drying, and I'm like, I could only imagine the dudes that do that for a living. I don't want to be that guy. So
if you want to speed it up, you just spike it some more, and then you're like, oh my god, I got to keep up, right?
Right.
There is a place for Chopmat, right? And we don't use it, because we don't like polyester. It smells bad. Vinyl ester at my shop, but Chopmat has its place, just not in road race bodywork. Catalyst, pre-ownership on our side, Catalyst was Chopmat. And what the old Catalyst stuff was coming, you didn't have consistency. Good stuff, obviously focused on drag racing more than anything else. But I think a lot of people had a huge revelation. It's taken a while for people to move over, right? The drag racing world is super into Catalyst stuff, but the old ways, right? Right. What people realize is, oh my God, look at, they used to sell what they called ultralight bodywork, which was more of a weave, right? Vinyl ester weave setup. And then when we acquired it, guys were like, are you going to still do it? Are you going to still do it? Are you going to still make ultralight? And we're like, we're trying to figure out what they're talking about, because we didn't know. And we came to the conclusion that our parts, the way we do them normally, which is what we converted the whole Catalyst line, was the same equivalent as ultralight. So I'm there going, these guys are so used to it. What am I going to do, right? Because there's the guy who has to have the ultralight. So we had to develop a new layup method that had a carbon, which gave about a 15% deduction in weight and a little bit of stiffness to do it. But it's a nightmare in terms of manufacturing, because you can't see air bubbles at the same time. And carbon's fun, but it can be stiff and a pain to work with and maneuver. But we had to offer that. And then over the last 4 years, to be honest with you, we've killed it on small stuff. Somebody calls me and says, hey, I'd like a drag step seat in carbon, like as an ultralight, I tell them to go take a shit instead because they'll save more weight doing that. And people ask, I usually try to joke around with the guys on the phone. I'm like, well, all right, you're calling me. Are you looking for the look? Because people have to understand there's carbon and carbon, right? Like if you look at the SE Moto stuff, right, that we acquired from Ed Sullivan, like that's aerospace carbon. Like the same stuff the same sort of procedures they use in F1, autoclave, huge pressures and heat. And then there's the cosmetic stuff that is probably heavier than fiberglass and not nearly as strong in some cases. And we try to distinguish that. But, I tell the guys sometimes, look, if you weigh 300 pounds and you're worried about weight, I would hit the treadmill before I worry about spending 33% more on an ultralight tail. But what we do focus on is the big stuff, like the 21 overtails, the monstrosities,
right.
Those make sense. It's volume based, right? Like you start getting to the sizes and then you start seeing weight savings. If you're a small piece like this, you're never going to see the difference.
So when did you like start iOneMoto and start buying up all these bodywork companies?
Oh, so
you said you retired, right? Like,
yeah, like the joke I tell people is I've been retired since 2017, but I've never worked harder in my life. I'm very fortunate. I had a great career in the life science industry, and I worked for a company that my dad followed and worked in, and my sister as well. And I enjoyed it, and it kind of like ballooned, right? It kind of went from, this, and this. So I'd been looking for a way to have my own business. So my family, a lot of my extended family and my grandparents were entrepreneurs and had businesses, and we have some stuff there. And I was ready to move on. Like I was super hungry at Millipore where I used to work. I wanted to get to the top echelon, but the company when I started was 3,000 to 6,000 people. And when I left was over 100,000 people. So in a 10-year span, it went from tiny to enormous. And I grew up with that company more or less. They used to call me a Millie baby, the offspring of somebody who had worked there for a long time. So I was looking for a way out. I was this close to going into the epoxy garage flooring business, a franchise. I was actually about 24 to 48 hours around from signing a contract that would have been a completely different world for me. And I got a call from Brad from Superbike Supply at the time. And he's like, I sold my business, the Superbike Supply. And I was like, oh man, you didn't call me. And he's like, yeah, I know. And I'd been pestering him a little bit because I was trying to find a solution, right? What did I want to do with my life? And then he told me he had tight tails, which he barely did anything with. And next thing you know, I wrote a check as fast as I could. And I decided it would be cool to interject myself into the industry that I liked because I was racing. I'm not famous in any way. Nobody knows who I am. I was in the Midwest, right? And Bodywork kind of just happened. So I lived in Boston at the time. I lived about an hour and a half from Eric Wood's house, actually. And I had ran into him at, Loudon to race, and I'd asked him advice at some points. And, I think he kind of blew me off, and, he probably gets it all the time, small little guy trying it. And rightfully so. He's like, hey, just one more person coming into the industry and they're probably not going to survive, blah, blah, blah. And then I took my first full year, all the products I sold, all the money I made, which wasn't much, and I spent it on going to the AIM Expo down in Florida, right? So I drove from Boston to Florida. I was gimpy. I was pretty much a gimp because I'd blown out my knee. And I spent 4 days at the AIM Expo right next to Yamaha. I got to meet, Chuck Graves, who at the time for me was like, celebrity figure. I got to see people like Chuck from Westby Racing and all the guys from Yamaha who were racing, Hayes and company. I'm literally the booth next door. And then I met an individual by the name of David Lee, who came up to my booth and, started shooting the shit. And I didn't know who he was. He wasn't relevant to my world at that time. And he came the first day, and then the second day he came by, and the third day, and I can be honest with you, the third day I was trying to get rid of him. Like I got customers I got to see, and you're in my way. Unfortunately, my dad at the time, he was there. He was helping me out because I was kind of gimping around everywhere, and I kind of punned him off of him, and they got along. Man, they were like two bees in the pot. They were best friends instantaneously. And the last day, he came up to me, and I said, you said you were in the business. What you do? And he goes, I own Sharkskins. And you should have seen my face go, oh my God, I just punned this guy on to my dad who knows nothing about motorcycles. He's a business guy. And oh man, hopefully I didn't screw something up. And he basically said, yeah, I'm ready to retire. I'm like, well, you're old as shit. So it probably is time to retire. And he was like, yeah, I agree. And long story short, I drove the next day back straight. I got in the morning just to get to work where I was working at the time. And he called me up and go, hey, if you're interested, I'm interested in selling you my business. And I said, hey, send me the paperwork. I don't tell you, his wife had probably taken the FedEx paperwork and all the stuff that I had asked for and shipped it overnight, FedEx Express. It showed up my front door. And then I had bought a ticket back to Florida that Friday and flew back where my parents were living at the time and drove over. And it kind of happened all fast, right? It's like, I couldn't leave my job unless there was enough revenue to, I needed enough to pay for a living. Like I couldn't live off of nothing, right? And this was kind of the opportunity. It was struggling. Sharkskins, if I didn't buy it, I mean, could have somebody else have done it, of course, but it needed a cash influx. Like it needed money to be sent in, and it needed to be regenerated, maybe reinvented, but it wasn't going to last. Like, they were hurting, and for many reasons, like the mom and dad, the owner and his wife, they were ready to retire. They were getting a little bit older, and the sons, it wasn't sure if they wanted to continue and how. So we came in, and my dad told me something that day. He goes, you know what? You don't buy something that's polished, finished, perfect, because there's nothing to fix. And I said, all right, I'll do that. I spent 2 hours in the facility with my dad. We walked out, got in his car, and we took 2 right-hand turns. I turned over to him. I said, I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And my old man said, all right, let's make it happen. And, obviously the next thing I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to get the money to do this? How am I going to do that? I got to move. I had a house up north. I had a job and career. I just signed to basically work a new job for 2017. And now I knew that I was going to have to, say, hey, I quit. And that's kind of hard when you've been doing something for 10 years, right? And, I called them a family. Like I've known these people for a long time. And right. Sharkskins happened, right? I literally made sure I had my knee surgery before leaving, because I knew the second I was gone, having knee surgery would be almost impossible. So December of 2016, I had knee surgery, and literally 1 month to the day, I was driving down to Florida with my RV packed completely with all my possessions, the motorcycles, the tools, everything. My old man in tow with me as well. We stopped in Virginia. I slipped on ice and re-busted up my knee and still drove here to close on Sharkskins. Oh my God. And then it barrel rode. And the reason why like catalysts happened after is I realized.
How soon did that happen? Because like, I kind of remember the transition because I needed some R1 frame covers.
Sure.
For my previous R1, and all of a sudden, like I said, I'm old and I've been around for a while, and Sharkskin was always kind of like the gold standard, and sure. Being the traditional broke ass racer, like I was like, oh well, there's these dudes in San Diego, it's like Mike and
I can drive there.
Yeah, so I'd go and Mike and Bonnie would hook us up, and I don't know what happened, whatever. Life happened, right? So they had to ditch the company and walk away from it. So like how soon? Because like it seems like it was pretty quick. Like you had the tie tails thing, and then all of a sudden you got Sharkskin, and then like how the hell does that happen, dude?
So there was about a 1 year gap, a little over a year between tie tails and the Sharkskins acquisition, and then it was less than 6 months. So really? I showed up January 7th. 2017 in Florida, no house. Well, I had a house, but I wasn't living in it. I lived out of my RV, and it didn't take more than 2 or 3 months for me to see the writing on the wall that I was going to run out of cash. Not necessarily personally, like I'm either going to have to put a whole ton of money in it and pray to the gods of Bodywork, or that motorcyclists will realize that we're still alive. And I had a customer call me, ask me about drag racing bodywork. And I talked to Andrew Swenson, who at the time was, painting a storm of bodywork, a lot of Sharkskins. And I had come to the conclusion that we needed to diversify the portfolio, not only road racing. Road racing, it just couldn't sustain what Sharkskin had grown into and continue. Like, yeah, we could have moved into a smaller facility, less people, slowed it way down, and restarted pretty much all over again. But I didn't want to lose that, right? Like the notoriety, the bigness, and all that. So I made the decision to go into drag racing with or without an acquisition. And then literally a week later, it's like the gods listened, right? Like somebody opened up and said, hallelujah, we got an opportunity for you. And I had heard word that Catalyst had been sending people money back and that all hell was breaking loose there. So I picked up the phone, not knowing Bonnie or Mike, and I got Bonnie on the phone. And I said, hey, this is Fred from iOneMoto, Sharkskins, a little bit more known, obviously. And I said, look, I think competition's good. So at least innovation. So what kind of money are we talking about for me to help you guys continue, or are you willing to sell? And Bonnie was like, holy shit, let's go. Like, yes, I want to sell, but we need to involve legal stuff, right? So I said, okay, well, let's do it, because I can do it. I want to help. And if I can't help in terms of keeping you guys alive and striving for innovation, then I will acquire you if it's affordable. And then, we went through the process. So I think I called them in June, and October 1st, around that time frame, I was in California packing the truck, and I actually had to leave them because there was a hurricane coming over, or I think it was Irma. And my old man, who said, yeah, I got it. Don't worry about it. You can stay there. He called me literally that day, goes, get on the first flight you can. I don't know what I'm doing here. You need to shut this place down. So Catalyst kind of happened, and Catalyst saved is probably not the best wording, but it helped with the cash flow situation. And that was key.
Gave you a boost.
Yeah. It threw us what we needed to sustain the people, because my biggest thing is I don't want to have employees just come and go, and I want to give them some stability, right? Like, as an owner, you're trying to make sure that your employees can live, right? And I can't tell, if I tell the laminators, hey, I don't have any work for the next 2 months, they're going to go, and if they need 2 months worth of work, they're going to go find another job, and then I lose the talent. And I knew Catalyst could do it. And, actually, Mike and I became, I would say, pretty good friends. We don't get to talk that often. Obviously, coast to coast is a little harder, but I think it was good for Mike. He got to go move on. And for us, he had told us, he's like, I wouldn't have sold it to anybody but you guys. He was ready to just let it liquidate and burn in hell. I mean, he was at the point.
Yeah, I heard the life happens. Like, it got pretty colorful over there. Like,
I think you know what, it's some things are better not to talk about, but for him and Bonnie, it just, I think me coming in, or iOneMoto coming in, was exactly what they needed to then move on. And the people who really got hurt the most is, Bonnie and Mike, they had their thing, and we had our thing when we discussed it, but it's the drag racing world that was really struggling. Like, it was rough for those guys. They didn't know who was going to build Bodywork for them. How was their sport going to continue? Like, a lot of people don't understand that Catalyst pretty much developed where drag racing is in terms of bodywork, right? Like, yes, they work with some strategic partners, and some of those strategic partners stole those designs that he ended up doing the work. Like, they gave him starting points, he did the work, and then they took it. And, we've been kind of fighting on that side of it, but he really built what they have now. The tails, when they came out, nobody liked them, and now everybody wants them, right? And that was key, you know, and he did what he needed to do. And you know what, we talk all the time, and he's like, man, I could just come there. We could, you know, I try to convince him to move to Florida all the time, but the guy's a good dad, man. He wants to stay in California next to his family and his kids. I would have been like, all right, let's do it, man. Let's come on, move. I don't think there's any type of money I could throw at him that it would convince him to come over, which is too bad. Mike, if you're listening, I still want you in Florida, man. Let's do it.
So like the real question is like, and it seems like you've kind of led up to that. Each one of those brands, you know, Tightails and Sharkskins and Catalyst, and SC Composite, right? Like,
well, officially iOneMoto. We didn't buy SC Composites. We bought the assets to it, but yeah, iOneMoto.
Right. Yeah. So each one of those companies had their own kind of identity.
Yep.
And, you know, you have the iOneMoto like umbrella over all of it. And I just was curious, like, it sounds like it kind of fell in your lap and it was like an offer you couldn't refuse. But I was like, how does this guy come in and like buy all these companies and not just rebrand them into your own, fold them under your own thing?
Well, I'm trained business. I grew up with somebody who talked about business every day at the dinner table.
Right.
I have a business degree, but I consider it a quote unquote bullshit degree because I don't believe that I learned anything from it. I learned from my uncles, my dad, my grandparents, right? And from work ethics. But I had the opportunity. I could have come in and just said iOneMoto and Sharkskins get removed. But the problem is, first, you're buying a business, right? But you're buying assets, but your IP and the Sharkskins brand, right? Tightails, it didn't matter. It didn't exist really. Like,
right.
It had been sort of started and then let go, right? So Tightails, if you do the notoriety, like, you know, it was 2 months where I didn't touch it more or less, and then it was like boom, right? And it's self-built itself because, you know, people now go motor holders, Tightails. They think those two brands, right? Like when I first started, Tightails poop, right? But Sharkskins, it had this presence, right? It's a cool brand. Yeah, it probably needs a little bit of some help, right? Because the shark probably needs to be modernized a little bit, but Sharkskins is a brand. I think the biggest thing is the younger community didn't know as well because they kind of died down and they were struggling. But if you ask the guys who had been around during the heyday, Sharkskins is the brand, and it's the brand of premier, and it set the standards, and it has done things that nobody else has done. I think there was some lack of investments in certain areas to keep moving it forward in certain technologies, but I couldn't just throw it away. I mean, a large part of the price tag was the brand, right? And then Catalyst was the same thing. I was actually struggling to figure out how the hell am I going to do this, because Catalyst made road racing bodywork, and you know, for a while we kept both. We were doing Catalyst road racing work, and I really quickly figured out that nobody buys it. You know, 5% of his overall business was road racing. It wasn't significant enough. And then I kept the mold around for people who needed replacements. And then I said, screw it. If somebody calls me and they need a lower, I'll sell them a Sharkskins upper and lower for the same price, and then get them off the Catalyst stuff, right? Like, right. And so it made more sense to just say Sharkskins road race bodywork made by iOneMoto and umbrella. And then strategically as a business setup is, okay, today Sharkskins and Catalyst, yeah, rock and roll. That's a large part of my business. And Tightail is not as much in percent wise. If tomorrow I don't have the time, or I don't think I can develop Tightails anymore, I can offshoot it and sell it to somebody. And there's a brand to it. They can take it off and make it a small business, or they can add it to theirs. And that was more interesting for me in the long run, because a business is always in a state of starting, holding, or selling, right? And holding is, okay, you're not really doing any investments, you're just kind of pocketing the cash. But starting is, okay, you're investing, you're going all out.
Right.
But there's also that in brands. And, you know, Tightails doesn't get enough of I'm the only one, right? That does that. None of my guys in the manufacturing do it. But it doesn't get more than 2 or 3% of my brain capacity, right? Because it's not significant enough. And Sharkskins and Catalyst, you know, have a lot, because obviously we're deep into it, and we're doing a lot. You know, 5,000 pieces isn't a small amount of pieces in this world. But I won't lie, that iOneMoto product, the carbon, in terms of development R&D has gone the most. And so it made sense after 1 and 2 that just do the same thing with 3, which is Catalyst, and just say Catalyst drag racing. Because in drag racing world, Catalyst is like Sharkskins doesn't exist, right? Like armor bodies is unknown of, pop bodies is not really known of. Like it's Catalyst, like that's the name. So I said, screw it, I'll just keep all of it. And then iOneMoto, you know, SE Composites was the name.
Yeah.
Right. And Ed had created a product that was really cool, man. I mean, it's been knocked off by everybody in Europe. I mean, it sucks because I paid for it and it's been copied and stolen, right? If you want to say it. But, you know, we have a thing in our shop. It's like, it's been stolen and copied, but it's a form of flattery, right? And every so often you'll probably see me like sound off on Facebook and get really upset about it. But you know what, if they got to steal it to make them feel good, that's fine. We're going to focus on making more new stuff. So, you know, if you look at the direction, like the fastest way to growth is acquisition and quick, right? So iOneMoto was cool for us for a really specific thing. I have a guy there named Rick Lee. He's one of the original sons. And his whole entire career with Sharkskins, he wanted to do carbon, man. Like true carbon, not fake carbon. They'd done fake carbon before, but they wanted to do true carbon. And I had an opportunity. I met, you know, I knew Ed and we talked and you know, we were super top secret. We met in October at the Daytona round for CCS right at the end of the year. And Ed does CCS Daytona. That's his thing, right? He'll do the 200, but he makes time to race that. And, you know, I convinced him to come to my shop. We talked a little bit and I saw it as, could we do carbon right away? Yeah, but it'd take us 10 years because we're so busy to develop it properly. So acquiring it got us 80% of it. And then, you know, Ed is good at what he does, but we wanted to put our touch to it. So in the last, whatever it's been, a little over 2 years, you know, we went from, I built an autoclave out of scratch, my own autoclave, which we learned a whole bunch about it, right? To now we have a 26-foot by 5-foot diameter autoclave, like 100 PSI, 400 degrees. Like we're literally making aerospace quality. I've gotten government contracts just because of that work. And we're using that tech, right? That totally different world, pre-preg, and bringing them to Sharkskins and Catalyst. So the only way to continue, in my opinion, is you got to go pre-preg glass. That's what we want to do. And nobody, I don't care who says it, nobody does pre-preg bodywork that's not in the fiberglass. It's really hard to find and nobody's really developed it. But I think you can do 20% to 30% more product and you remove a lot of weight and you're making a superior part. And I think on the finishing side, it helps too. It'll help everybody in the long run. You know, it'll help us, but you know, to do it, we have to do carbon. And to be honest with you, that carbon, man, even the guys knocking us off, they have a hard time. They'll be heavier than ours because they'll do a lot of post work that we don't have to do. And, you know, they're not doing the chevron, which is really cool. You know, if you look at one of those pieces, you know, and that takes time. And that was developed by Ed. A trick was developed to make that happen that nobody does. I mean, we've had guys from Formula One shops who come in and guys who have been in the industry for 30 years and they're like, you're getting that out of that mold. You know, we're getting parts out of molds that are not aluminum that look like they came out of aluminum mold. And that's because we're putting our touches on it. And the future, you know, I think a lot of people confuse carbon and carbon, right? Like we're not just looking for shit cosmetic carbon. We're looking for high-end cosmetic and structural. Like this is when one day we finally solve all the bricks to the equation of making a full set of carbon fiber bodywork. It won't be cheap, but it will be the best. I mean, we've had stuff from Japan and China and all over the world get sent to us. And, you know, there's some guys that shaping wise are amazing, but technically they struggle in certain areas and we're trying to master that.
So, you know, now that you went down the carbon rabbit hole, John McCowan, like I know you know this guy.
John, yeah. I feel like he's the R1 guru.
He's the Colorado R1 dude, right? And
I only have so many of those guys on my Rolodex. John's.
Yeah.
He's a guy. He's a character. He's a great dude.
He's probably going to be your first customer for R1 carbon stuff, you know.
Oh yeah, we've already helped him out.
He's all jonesing for it. So
carbon.
Yeah. It's like the limit of my carbon is like sitting behind me on the table back there. You know, like that's my carbon. That is carbon.
That's technically very complex. Very actually that's almost harder. It's different. Those are pressure plated usually and very complex structures.
Yeah, the wheels, everything's carbon. It's weird. So but yeah, you know, like let's talk about like what is there the difference? Is there like a primary difference between the stuff that's available, like you can go online and buy it from your website versus stuff that you make for pro teams?
Yeah, so yes. The long story is yes. The easiest way to explain it is in manufacturing, like you try not to do different arrangements because it screws up your whole workflow. So obviously a lot of people know we don't do as much as we used to in sponsorship, but we can't afford to do it, right? It's very costly. You know, you have some teams that we've worked with or we work with, and we're giving a significant amount of investment. And, you know, Westby is a team we work with now exclusively, like in for some reason, I really like Chuck. Chuck's the first guy I ever met at a racetrack that fixed my bike that I crashed the first time I ever went out on it. And I have he doesn't remember it, but I remember it vividly. And Dane, I didn't get to meet him because I was foolishly timid to talk to the guy, right? And even though I thought he was, you know, he was cool, right, in my book. And so when I could and I made the decision, I reached out to them and only them. Like we've had some other teams, but they're really the only ones to work with. So we will do for like them. We did a 4-piece super bike kit for the R1. We don't really like selling it to the general public because it's a 4-piece kit that requires a special radiator, special air duct, special mounting kits, all this stuff. So in that aspect, we'll do some stuff within reason. And you know, if it's a starting platform with one and we can quickly do it, cool, we're good with it. In terms of layup, we will usually do what we call a lighter arrangement. Pro race teams don't care if it blows up into a million pieces when they crash, obviously to a degree, right? Obviously they want to try to pick it back up and go, but they're not worried about getting 16 races out of it. They want to make that one race and they want to do as well as they can. And if the bodywork doesn't necessarily survive because they crashed, no big deal. And obviously we need to supply. So they usually ask us to go ahead and do it a little bit lighter than we would do for normal. And we use a different type of material, which is not as sturdy or doesn't necessarily elongate the same way as your everyday rider. So when we sell bodywork to the everyday guy, well, you know, $1,000 is $1,000.
Broke ass racer, man. You gotta make that thing last the season.
Yeah, and you want to be able to fix it easily. And you know, we can cut corners all day long. We don't, because it's, you know, if it blows up on you, then it's our reputation. So we do 2 layers of a 9-ounce material, very specific. There are some models that we've done a little bit of a modification because of the geometries you have to. But normally they'll get a little bit lighter, but it's on special request. There's some teams that we worked with, not necessarily as sponsors, but they'll say, hey, can we get the really special stuff? And it's like, okay, but FYI, don't get mad that you have to buy another set, you know. And I don't care if it's the best bodywork in the world. We have to remember one thing. If you crash at 160 miles an hour, I don't care how good the bodywork is, more than likely it's not going to survive as well if you crash at 30. And a lot of things dictate how bodywork crashes. The elongation is a huge importance, right? Like our recipe helps with that. And polyester doesn't really work well in that area, and things crack and break differently. And some competitors that I won't say their names kind of blow up into a million pieces, but they're so cheap where you also just go buy another set or they give you a second set for free. So the key in the long
Hey,
run,
AirTech Gray Line, dude. Let's just use that. AirTech Gray Line from the 90s.
The key in the long run, right, is we do special stuff for race teams, but we really don't like doing it. Like, and not because we don't like the race team. It's just it kills our production, and people don't understand. Like, when we make a special thing for Westby, like, we are literally building a set of molds for them, and we're never going to make any money off of it, right? Like, we might sell one or two of those kits for those guys who have to have what that pro race team had, but that's very short and narrow. And like, people struggle to realize, but when we develop a new set of molds, a new motorcycle comes out, I'm looking at a $15,000 to $20,000 investment on my side.
Wow.
So, and that's for upper fairing, lower fairing, a tail might have a draft shield depending on its stuff, and front fender, right? And that's just that. And in some bikes we do the tank shrouds and the tank cowls, and we don't really do a lot of rear fenders, but we'll do that stuff, but there's a lot of cost to it. So
right.
Also, the biggest thing is, like, years like this year, we have the new ZX10, we have the RS660, we have the new R7, which we were fortunate enough to have way before anybody else knew about it coming out. And then we have the new Hayabusa, which is at my shop, right? And we've had to do all of them. So when you start counting how many molds it is, you're there going, oh my God. And
like, hope people race this.
Yeah. And that was actually one of the problems they ran into in the past. It was like, okay, here you go. There's 10 new bikes. Let's take the dice and throw it and pick two. And unfortunately, if you pick the wrong two, guess what? You made no money and you spent money, right? So there's a limit of time. So, like, one of the investments we made is 3D scanning and trying to go down that rabbit hole to expedite and create new stuff. And next year, my guys are probably going to hate me because I have a outrageous expectation of making 50 new products for the year. And they're probably going to want to shoot me in the face. But if we don't, we won't grow. And at the end of the day, like, I can't keep eating ramen noodles. I mean, I'm surviving, but I need to start eating some steaks, and we have to move forward with new products. That's the only way to do it. So fortunately, 4 new bikes, cool. I don't know what the docket is for next year yet. Like, there's rumblings, but there isn't going to be a new R1. The R7's already done. Like, what else is coming out? We don't know. It's still a little too early. EICMA's around the corner, right? And usually there's some announcements.
Right.
Unfortunately, like the RS660, we've had the bike, and I have a really good customer who brought us the bike, and I said, look, I'm so stacked. I don't know when we're going to finish this. Just FYI. And she has 2, right? 2 of these. And we're just finishing it now. Like, the race season's over, right? 2021 is pretty much done. And we're just finishing it. I think in the next week or 2, it'll be done, right? And, unfortunately, sometime we're probably not going to recoup the money invested in the R660, because the first ones to get there, first one to market, wins. The challenge with a bike like that is the new aero designs that all these companies are doing with these, like, double-sided bodywork. It's actually a detriment to all the bodywork companies. I don't care what the others say. They are not as profitable. They're much harder to do. And if you take all the bodyworks, when they're all done, when all the manufacturers finish this RS660, right, there's a couple of finished, and you line them up, you'll see who took all the shortcuts and who tried to stick to the original. And that's what we try to do. But unfortunately, sometimes it kicks you in the butt.
Right.
It takes longer. The bodywork ain't getting cheaper to make. And that's the big thing people don't understand. Like, SV650 bodywork, super easy to make. Nothing hard. The newer R6s, the newer R1s, super complex. We have molds for an upper that have, on the R7, give you an idea, the mold is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces just to make the upper.
Well, there you go. I'm gonna follow that up with a comment from Matt Cavarles. He and his wife just got a couple of sets of R7 bodywork from you guys.
Cool. Hopefully FedEx didn't destroy them.
Yeah. So Matt's question is, how many sets of bodywork can you make on a set of molds before the mold itself needs to be either replaced or repaired?
It's a fantastic question. So ideally you want to get as many as you can, obviously, right? It's very ancestral. The material we use to build the molds is a lot of the same materials we've used to build the parts. It's
Right.
different weights. It's a couple extra steps. So obviously a lot thicker, and mass equals some assistance on and longevity. Normally, probably a 1,000 parts as long as it's maintained well, right? And maintenance is always a challenge when you're rushing and trying to pump out as much as you can. We've had molds where we pull 5 parts and it's destroyed because something went wrong. We messed up, and we've had molds that just keep producing, just constant. And remember, the more technical, the more ways it gets stuck in there or it can cause damage and makes it harder. But super simple molds usually last a lot longer. But on a typical, you hope for about 500 to 1,000 parts out of a mold. Now, remember that there ain't that many motorcycles out there for some bikes, like the new KTM, which is the Kramer. They're only bringing 100 in there. We won't invest in it. Nobody will, but that'd be something you never have to worry about. The R6 0816, the most epic motorcycle in racing right now. Well, I don't know about right now, but it is probably the most famous motorcycle of this generation, right? We've built thousands out of those molds, and we've had several generations of molds. So we get to a point where the mold looks like it's struggling. For example, we're doing it right now with the 2015 R1. We built hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those. So we'll build a whole new mold set off of it. So we'll build a new master. We'll pump off the molds, and we'll use the old ones as guide planes, and then build another one and go. Sometimes we'll build 2 sets at a time too. So you run them consecutively, and one dies off. You just throw it away when it's not as popular, and you still have one master.
I was wondering about that. Like when you recreate a mold, like how do you get it to where it's
exactly the same?
Yeah.
It's a challenge. I mean, if you're rebuilding molds, there's a generational thing. There definitely will be a generational. The way we do it, it's very minute, but you'll lose a little bit here and there. You won't notice this every day. We'll notice a little bit more on our side. But we build a part that's 4 times thicker than what you would buy, so it's stiff, right? It ain't moving. And then we jig it in a way so it doesn't move. And then we use the old molds as platforms for where our flanges are. And then we'll also take advantage, like, hey, we made a mistake here when we built this. We could make it a whole lot easier if we just change our thing here and there, and we'll modify it. But once you've done the majority of the work, you just have to kind of go back, and you're repeating a couple steps. But that, who would have known the Yamaha 08 would last for 8 years, and then really more than that, right? Like the 17 is basically the same bike, just a different cosmetic look, right? And some technical stuff. But sometimes you make a mold and you never have to worry again about remaking it, because it doesn't become a very popular bike. CBR 500 is a perfect example. I think we've built 4 of them since that bike has came out. So that's a bike that we lost money on, or the previous ownership did, right?
I remember the little bike classes always being an uproar about that bike, not wanting it to be legal, and then they found out it's actually slower, and so they're like, oh, okay, we can run that thing now.
The funny thing is, I ran the smaller CC class when I lived in Kansas City, and with MCRA at the time. Shout out to all my buddies out there. Topeka, and I lived real close. I love Topeka. Alpha, the carousel, one of my favorite tracks. Terrible track at the time. It's resurfaced since I left, but I started, and I was like, I bought a Honda 250, CBR 250. Terrible bike, terrible. I will openly admit it to the rest of the world. Ari Henning, I don't know how he pulled it off, but he did great with it, and I know it's a part of, because he did a lot to it. I bought one, and I put it on the racetrack, and then I raced against a Ninja 250, and then I bought a Ninja 250 the next day, because I just couldn't. I was literally pinned. You couldn't do anything, and there was one other guy to race with who had a CBR. Now I have 2 of them because because I'm an idiot. But the small classes are great. The problem with the small classes for bodywork manufacturers, honestly, is the bodywork's super technical. So you're paying $4,000 or $5,000 for a small bike, and then you're going to be paying $1,000 for the bodywork. And it's not that we don't look to try to gouge, right? We're just trying to make sure we can make some money to pay the bills, right? But at the end of the day, the bodyworks are getting complicated. I mean, the Ninja 400 is not a simple kit. It is complicated. It's a lot of pieces. And the guys who are manufacturing, Kawasaki, Yamaha, all those guys, they don't care about us. Like, that's not their goal. They're trying to make something that looks cool and sells, and they're selling it to the populace more than racing. Fortunately, we're on the backside trying to figure out how we're going to make this look like it and make some money and not kill people with the price.
So are you like planning to try to like grease the like Suzuki to go remake the S-Rad shape so it's like nice and big?
It's a bolus. I think we got lucky on this the Yamaha R7, right? Like, we got access to that bike right beforehand, and we've had a long relationship with Yamaha. I mean, way back, right? Way before my time, and all relationships do this, right? And we got the opportunity to do it. That's not a small bike, but it's a twin, right? And obviously people saw that, and Yamaha saw the investment to be made on the R7, because I'm sure the FZ07 was a big component to it, right? And I'll be honest with you, I would be delighted if the FZ07 rots in hell and never gets raced again in terms of bodywork, because it's not as good of a kit. Nothing to do with the R7. The FZ07 is a cool platform. The problem is, it's a project that somebody started and it kind of got blown off, and there's some historicals on that, right? Yeah, but I could have
started here. You know that, right? Like, that started with one of my bikes.
Yeah, no, it's cool. The problem was and this is on any naked or bike that wasn't originally built, so just like the SV650. It's a nightmare for us because we need mounting points, and we need to make sure that it's straight, and we need to make sure that it's as easy for the end user, not the racer. The racer who knows how to install it, no problem. But the guy who wants to be the racer, the guy who doesn't know, or guy or lady, I should be really politically correct there, they don't know necessarily how to, and it's an expensive bike to convert, right? It's not simple. The geometry is complicated. I know there's some individuals who can talk about that all day long. That's outside of my scope. The bodywork, it's cool, it's simple, it's based off of some old Yamaha stuff, but fairing stay, you have to have a special fairing stay, and then on top of it, it's theoretically the best way to put a fairing stay on that would be to weld to the frame, because a clamp around a tube is never going to be as strong, or we'll have some technical difficulties. Where the R7 comes in, very close to what that SE07 is, right? Some slight changes. And I think that's really cool, right? Like, that's the direction we should always go in. And for me, that's a small bike, right? It's not 1,000 cc bike. And I think there's a huge push there. And I think the 400s, and even if they were to do a 500 again, I think that series is good, because that, everybody who starts on a smaller bike is always faster when they move up. It's never really works out the other way, where you start on 1,000, you're just fast, right? And I think to develop road racing, you have to have the small CC stuff, and we will continue to build it, even though every time I cringe because it gets harder and harder to build. I know there's some rumblings of some new stuff coming around that we might be doing as well. So, CC, small CCs, big CCs, whatever, we'll build it. If it's cool and it can get raced, I'm in it.
That's amazing. That's amazing that that you're able to even do all of that. Like, I just you're kind of living the dream. Like, you basically quit your job and handled something. It's kind of inspirational to even hear that. Well,
so there's several aspects to it, though. Like, I need to make sure that it's all understood by the whole world and yourself as well. I took a huge risk, fine, and that more important thing is, it's not just me. I mean, I did the financial aspect and running the business and some strategic stuff, but it's my guys. Like, the group of people that I have working for me, like, if you don't have them, you don't have Sharkskins. Like,
right.
Yeah, so there's the proponent, the original family, right? And then, I still have one of the sons. He's a big deal. Like, yeah, if he left tomorrow, it would be a struggle. Could we continue? Sure. I don't want him to leave, obviously, and he's a key component. He's my number two, if you want to look at it that way. But then we've added, we have a master boat builder, which obviously has nothing to do with motorcycles, but we have trained him to work in motorcycle world. And we have laminators that have been there over 25 years. Like, there are people there that have been there since the start. And without them, to be honest with you, I can't do it, So it's mostly on them. They did all the hard work. I'm there like an idiot all the time, but they're the ones that make it. I just make sure that the bills get paid and they can continue to do it,
So I've actually got this question a couple of times. Earlier this afternoon or yesterday, Chloe, the data girl from back east.
Yeah. I keep her name keeps coming up. She's
Matt,
French, just like me.
Matt Cavarles just asked the same thing, and it's
Sure.
like, do you think that 3D printing bodywork is going to be a thing?
That's a fantastic question, and I know a couple people who have already looked into it and are pretty adamant. Natalie's husband from Road Race World, I know he's been playing with it for certain things. There's an economic point of view, right? Like, it's expensive. 3D printing, yes, we do it for bracketry to help with racers and to make the bodywork actually last and do better. I do some brackets for the R1 in the rear and to remove recesses wherever possible, because those are a nightmare. I think, yes, there's a place, but for large manufacturing, there isn't. There might be a way to 3D print molds. There's the price, right? And then there's the finish work. So like, we've done some experimenting, like on a small scale. Like, I made an air duct earlier this year where we took the Westby Carbon Smith air duct and with Ryan from Carbon Smith and said, here, we're going to make actual carbon piece, which is lighter and theoretically stronger too, right? And we use that to make it, right? But we wouldn't have used it to make a mold because it wouldn't have lasted. I think that the key, what people realize is, there are layers and things like that with 3D print. So I don't think 3D print will completely remove what we're doing. I think it will help create stuff faster. But, there's some big companies with big CNC routers, which we bought earlier this year, which we're still trying to kind of put into place. You can cut, big foam blocks of special foam and get what the 3D printer is doing. You're not laying a material down, you're just removing material, right? It's like the same process of milling. I think that's going to be more important for the industry, just composites in general. Like, it's huge already. Like, we're just late to the game. And honestly, it's a technical thing that, you need to have somebody who can do the computer work and run the machine. I think 3D printing, I don't think you're going to get what you get with a carbon piece, right? Cosmetically and physically, but I could be wrong. I got to witness, fortunately, I get to see some stuff outside of motorcycle world, like in the car world, a spoiler wing for a company that I'll leave the name out. A super nice guy. They do some amazing stuff. Out of all the carbon stuff I've seen come into my shop, it's one of the best things I've seen. It's pretty radical. And they use some 3D printed technology in it. And the failure point is exactly where I would have thought the failure point would be. And, 3D printing has its place. I made a huge mistake in 3D printing. I came out with 3D pump rings, 3D printed pump rings for our fuel tanks. In concept, work great, but I didn't think about the person installing the fuel pump. And we had one case where a guy took an impact and took a screw and impacted the screw into the hole, right? That's supposed to take it, and ripped the mechanism that would hold the pump in place. So yeah, his tank never sealed because it would never be able to. And we realized, what, it's cool. Prototype with people who understand how this works and very strict, if Westby came to me, we could do it because I know they wouldn't use an impact on a 4mm screw.
One too many ugga-duggas.
Yeah, but in mass production, impossible. Like, in mass production for that scenario, not feasible, and I love 3D printing. I think it's cool. Like, when you're prototyping, it's awesome. I think shapes will work, or if you're trying to do something, to save some time, it'll work, but I don't think it'll replace what we do. No.
I mean, I know that the attack team they have a 3D printer that they use for their own superbike stuff. So
yeah, probably religiously too.
He's using it for ram air ducting, and then like the dash holder that goes on top of the duct, and then the ears.
Yeah.
So they have the ears are replaceable, which is pretty cool. But I mean, he's not selling that stuff. I keep trying to scumbag him into making that stuff, but dude, it costs too much money and time.
Well, there's a place, right? Like there's also an effective, like how fast can you print to print? How many printers can you run, right? Like Ryan from Carbon-Smith has a bunch of printers, and he has found his mecca, right? But there is a economic scale that becomes complicated. Well, like you got to think about the electricity, the material, the upkeep, the maintenance, right? And we've done a couple of things that I wish I never did in 3D print, but we did, and I get to put my name on it. I quote unquote invented the quarter turn gas tank holder for the R6. Nobody had done it. I 3D printed it all. And today, if there was enough of a request for it, I would go ahead and just make them out of aluminum. I actually had them. I have a buddy that moved at the time to the UK. Now he's in Dubai, I believe. And he crashed it, and that thing, the 3D print worked great, right? But the problem isn't it working or not. The problem is I couldn't make them fast enough and at a quality level that I was really happy with. And then I thought it'd be really cool. It was an aluminum piece, right?
Right.
I know that like the ears and of like a fairing stay, it sounds cool, but then when you have to produce 20 fairing stays, like how long does that machine have to stay up running? Where in the composite world, like the carbon piece, okay, could we lay it up in an hour and then have one and then do that every day? Or if I can build 15 of them in less than 15 hours and it takes 2 or 3 days for the printer to do it, then it doesn't make sense for us.
So I got a question from Sophia now, the other partner in that power couple on the R7.
Sure.
So Sophia wants to know, like, how do you have any plans to do ram air for the R7?
No. No. Well, let me rephrase this. First, the R7, I'll give you guys was released the first week of July. We've built over 50 sets of it since. We've delivered 46 sets out of the 50. So we're in the last finishing stages. We're just about to release, I think in 2 weeks, a Superbike seat-based setup for it, which we're kind of working on right at this very moment. You know how I was complaining about the FZ07 and how it just, that's not what it was designed to have, right? Air intakes, not designed for it. The bodywork was not thought about for that. None of that was planned ahead. The FZ07, I purposely called Yamaha and said, do you want the headlight hole or not? Because obviously there's no air going through anything on it. And they said, just close it.
Put a sticker on it. I think that's I rode that bike. The one that Westby put together that's on tour right now. I got to ride that bike at Brainerd, and it's like, how did they do the ram air? Oh, it's a sticker. Okay.
Yeah. So that bike was at my shop, right? And I tore that thing apart for Chuck, who had to go behind it and probably fix all the things I screwed up. But the way it was set up is obviously it was like the perfect hole for an air intake.
Right.
But what people don't understand is how do you get the air from that hole all the way to the back, pretty much to under the seat location, more or less, right?
Dryer ducting.
Yeah.
From Home Depot.
We could do it, but if tomorrow somebody said, I don't care what it costs, build it, and I had infinite amount of time, we could do it. The problem really becomes, is it worth it? Are we going to sell enough units? And do people realize how it's going to skyrocket the price of the bike?
Right.
And then you're going to ask yourself, are you better off staying on the treadmill for 30 minutes more or spending a couple grand more to get air intake?
Yeah. So you mentioned the Superbike seat, and now both Matt and Sophia are giving me the whole shut up and take my money. So you'll probably get some more of their money pretty soon, I guess.
That's actually been one of the highest requested, one of the biggest requests. We're designing it in a way where if you're short, it'll work for you. And if you're tall, you'll be able to make it work for you. There are some companies, which I won't say the name, that took the R3 platform and shoved the person 3 feet in the air. Right?
Yep.
Or the BMW, the new one, you have to buy their tail, their seat, and their tank cowl, right? And we designed it where you don't have to buy all the miscellaneous stuff. You can run the seat and you can lift it. And we try to do that because we're cost conscientious. We know we're already expensive. We want more opportunity for you guys to ride it and then come back for cooler stuff later. I think that the R7 seat base is perfect. Like you got the individuals will like it. It'll be a lot like the R6 that we're well known for, and the R1. We'll probably make it a little different because those we don't make any money on those. We do it because nobody else does it. Technically those R6. I'm sure you've seen it. The R1 and the R6 step seat. No, it's not step seats. Superbike seat bases are engineering marvels in its own way. I mean, there's 8 layers of fiberglass, I believe, in total between the top. It's 2 pieces that are built and bonded together. And if you don't do it at the right time, it doesn't work, and you throw it away and you do it all over again.
Like how much of that happens with your shop? Like I do remember, and I'm saying this because of that other bodywork company that no longer exists. They used to throw away a lot of parts, and because something wouldn't dry right, or like he didn't mix enough hardener in it. Like it was a learning process.
Sure. So I would say 99.99999% of the stuff does not go in the trash. Like we are very, very, very fortunate. Well, first, it comes out and it's got a problem, we can fix it.
Right.
There's a certain point where it's like, oh man, we just lost all the profit, right? I mean, so the margins are pretty tight. So when there's a mistake, we don't make money, right? And
right.
Obviously mistakes happen. Most of the times when a mistake is made, it can be recuperated on the post side. We've had everything. I had a laminator who now has been with us for 2 years, and she didn't realize that resin requires hardener. She just saw people doing it and nobody was paying attention because we're running at 1,000 miles an hour. And she mixed the resin and never put hardener, and then she put some Cavasil in it and she wiped all over it. And she built the whole part. The next day it comes out and it's goop. Nothing hardened, nothing cured. So how do you fix it? It was a disaster because then you have to pull it all out, you have to clean it, and you got to hope to God that you can rescue it. And then, we've had it where people never waxed the molds or never prepped the molds properly. So the part is permanently stuck inside. But when that happens, I'll tell you, all hell breaks loose on my shop because somebody's head's going to roll, right? Like,
because you kind of got to make a new mold, right? I mean, almost.
Yeah, we run into like the R7 when it first came out. We made 2 sets of molds. Those 2 sets of molds are gone first because we made a foolish decision of making a 4-piece set for it, and before I pushed us to a 2-piece set. But the tail we had 2 tails, and I'll tell you, one of those tails never came out, and that was my fault. Because I walked by and said, I need that part. And I thought it was prepped because it was in a place that should have been prepped. Threw it in, they built the part. And the next day oh shit. And I'm like, I felt like a cartoon character. My foot was up in the air and I'm trying to pull it apart. And, you rip at a certain point, the fiberglass fails before the mold has a bunch of fiberglass, but it will fail. And to be honest with you, it was my first slap in the face. Like, Fred, I run about 1,000 miles an hour and I got a million things going on at the shop. So when I walk by, like, I assumed I made an ass of myself, but it happens. It doesn't happen very often. When molds get older, they tend to stick a little bit more. The surfaces have just been beat up. And then we have to make a decision. Do we spend a lot of time fixing it? Do we remake it? Or does it need to be paid attention? And then sometimes, you got somebody who's waxing it and isn't paying attention. And if a spot's hard to get their finger in and you got to shove your finger in a spot where your finger barely fits, they'll skip over it. And that's a force where it sticks, and then you rip it out and the chunk comes out. We either have to fix it or we fix the part. But fortunately, it's very rare we throw a part away. If we throw a part away, it's because it was a part that never should have been made, and nobody in the right mind will ever buy it, which is rare.
So I have a couple of like, dude, we're going pretty long here, and it's awesome.
You can go. That's cool.
I'm letting you just go, dude. It's great. So some technical stuff. There's, and I'm just gonna like word vomit, and I'm gonna let you like roll with it, right? So sure. There's like the bodywork that you get that's got the glossy white finish on it, and then you've got the stuff that's like primered. Is that something about like the difference between the kinds of materials used, or sure. And then also after that, there's also like you see bodywork that has a little strip of carbon and all the mounting points, or Kevlar. And the Kevlar ones, I remember being a freaking nightmare to like drill the holes to. Oh yeah. And I'm sure you blow through a bunch of scissors messing with that stuff, right? So you want to talk a little bit about those materials?
Sure. All right, well, we'll do in stages because I can word vomit this all day long.
Well, there's one last bit to that. Like sure. Which process, I guess, would be the best to like avoid having your painter give you the Matumbo finger, right?
No.
Right?
No. Right?
No. Not going to paint that.
So the white and the black you usually see is a white or black gel coat, which is polyester vinyl ester, but poly based. Okay. And polyester has its world in it, and it works really well in the boat industry. When you see a white hull boat, that's usually polyester based white gel coat, usually, right? We don't use it because it's prone to spider cracking. If it's not prepped right, you will fisheye. Your painter will hate you. It is not as strong or stable. It is heavy. Okay. A lot of European companies do that. In Europe, it's almost a standard because the guys just get it and slap a sticker on it. But what you also get at those European companies is it's cheap, right? Like, oh, it's cheap. It's just expensive to ship a little bit, but it's cheap. Well, because they don't finish. Like they pull it out of the mold, they cut it barely, and sometimes it comes with extra holes. Because it's cheap, because they can't afford to go finish it.
Right.
And what ends up happening is your poor painter now has to fix their garbage. And some are not that bad. Obviously, there's some companies that do a pretty good job, right? But if a mold has gotten older, it's chunked, and the lines where the seams are will be noticeable. And sometimes you'll have cavities, and and we have that stuff too. But you don't see it because we care and we fix it. On top of it, we take on the workload that your painter would need to do. So a painter, now I know that they're feast or famine, some of those guys, and they have a rough life because they don't know what chemicals are being used, how they're being salted and cleaned, and they don't know what the guy put in the machine and what the guy did on the other side. They're trying to just make the best product. And a racer's paint job, if there's the slightest little problem, they get all upset about it, right? So those guys have a difficult life when it comes to dealing with, they got to worry about what's coming to them and what they're sending off, and both sides are hitting them, right? So we take that off their plate as much as we can. So we fix it. We want it great primer, and we want it to the spec and to the slickness specifically. So when it gets to the painter really just has to scuff and go. Like he doesn't, if shipping, there's stuff that happens, that we can only do so much to protect, right? But he or her can come, pull our part out, scuff it. They don't need to fit it on the bike because they know it'll fit. And if they are smart and they do the quarter turns, they have all that stuff done, and they literally do their whatever base coats they want, whatever color arrangement they want. They shove it back in the box wrapped properly, because otherwise the customer will get upset, and they're done. Whereas a European model comes over, those guys are going to be bondoing. They'll be probably using some polyester resins and re-glassing, and then hoping to God that nothing goes wrong. And then they've got to clean and prep. And the bill should be a whole lot, you're saving, let's say $500 on bodywork from Europe, but then your bill on the painter side should be $500 more at least. And that's where, unfortunately, some painters, I think, not to bash on them, they don't charge what they should because it's feast or famine. And at the end of the day, they need to paint. That's what they do. And those guys work hard. I mean, there are companies, and I can't specifically say that Andrew Swinson went out of business or stopped doing his business because of that, but a large part of it is like they got to feed their families too. And if they're cutting corners to get the business and it's just paying for the paint, then why bother, right?
Right.
I'll lose half my business if I double my price, but at least you'll be able to feed yourself, right? Like, our product, when it comes, we have our bad days too, but typically it comes, it's ready to rock and roll, right? And that's the difference between gray primer and a white gel coat. Now, we've explored to figure out how to do it, and we've done like the new R617 seat base and the R1 seat base, and a lot of people have seen them in black, right? We did a gel coat black. Well, I'll tell you, the hardest thing to find and source in the United States, actually pretty much in the world, is black epoxy gel coat. It's mostly a polyester-based material, right? So you do that with polyester resins. You typically don't put polyester gel coat in epoxy. So on another point, we don't do it because it's not a mechanical and a chemical bond at the same way. You can put a polyester gel coat finish on a epoxy part, but you have to make it mechanical. So you basically, quote unquote, paint it into your mold. Then you got to scuff it, which is an extra step, and then you lay your part, and then it's not a chemical bond, it's a mechanical bond. So it's never, the best kind of bond is the chemical, right? The next is the mechanical. So we try to do it all in chemical. So we don't go that way. And also it is just so hard to get a high quality black epoxy gel coat. There's only 2 companies that I found in the world that do it. We've tested both of them and we liked one of them, and then we couldn't get any more because it was coming over a boat from Germany. And then we did another one, and then the supplier decided that now you have a minimum of 15 gallons that you have to buy at a time. And the problem is we're not using enough to justify it. So I'd have to throw away 2/3 of the material by the time I would use the first third, right? Because it would be bad.
Right.
So, in our process, not worth it. The Europeans, I don't know if it's because painters actually get what they deserve or if they just don't give a shit. Now, you asked a question about Kevlar and reinforcement.
Yeah.
So have you ever heard the word marketing gimmick? A lot of it is a marketing gimmick. We reinforce too, but we don't use carbon and we don't use Kevlar. Now, carbon and Kevlar have their places in composites. I won't deny it. Kevlar is pretty much useless in certain applications. It's under compression. It's useless. It's just not worth it. If you're going to make a motorcycle skid plate, great. That's what it's designed for. If you wanted to make it bulletproof, I guess you could do that too, but it's just not cost effective. And like you said, it kills, it's hard to cut. It's hard to drill. It's hydrophobic, if I remember right. Hydrophilic. It's one of the whichever one. It's the opposite of everything else, and water actually delaminates it. It's not good. And I'm not an expert in this. I just know some things, right? It's got its place, but it's not in bodywork. So carbon reinforcement, okay, it's cool, it works. But if you spend a little bit more time and do it with fiberglass, you'll get the same results. What people don't understand or misconstrue is carbon in some cases is not stronger than fiberglass, right? Like, you can get into stiffness, elongation, and strength, and those are 2 different things. But what you need to understand is, yeah, you put a carbon or a Kevlar patch in, you drill a hole and you put a bolt through it, right? And you crash and it rips. That square will be perfect. On the outside, it'll be destroyed. So what you'll see in certain cases is the recess is in there and the structure around it's gone or broken. But if you do it in fiberglass right, you won't get that. So it's actually harder to fix if you have a big square than a small square, right? Like it's got all these added, advantages and disadvantages. Like carbon's got its place, but not worth it. So we don't do it because technically it's just a marketing gimmick. There's a
Well,
bunch
yeah,
of
I kind of agree with that too, because if you look at the inside of that stuff, you see the little black spots where all the mounting points are. So it's like letting you know that it's reinforced there. So yeah, I get that.
it,
That's funny. I didn't know that. That's funny.
if you we've wanted to, I feel like time, if I was better with social media and videoing and whatnot, or I had somebody who could help me, like we've always wanted to make a test bed and just show technically what it does, right? Like in the back, in the days we used to make number plates and we would give them to people and make them polyester and make them epoxy fiberglass, and we'd bend them and people would see the difference, right? And we should do videos on that stuff. I mean, I question if people are actually going to watch, but maybe after today we'll realize that a lot of people are interested, right? But the concept is marketing gimmicks sell a lot. You know, we don't spend a whole lot of time on marketing, and it's just because it's not my passion and it's not my thing. I'd rather spend more time getting more bikes out. But there's a bunch of companies that I compete with that at the end of the day, like this special quote unquote fiber, look, it's aerospace, it's S grade or it's E grade. It ain't anything special. You know, I can say that our resin is aerospace grade resin because it came from aerospace, but you know, kayak resin, come on, give me a fucking break. You're like, excuse my English or my français, but you know, at the end of the day, you know, carbon, full carbon, cool, super cool. Companies that are doing full carbon, great. But there are certain cases where full carbon is not as strong. It's light, it's cool, it's stiff, it's got some properties that are really cool, but you've got to weigh the options. You know, there are certain cases where it isn't. If you want the cosmetic and you want to pay, cool. You can also just wrap it with a wrap that looks like carbon and it will work too, right? Like, you know, we struggle with this because we believe we're purists. When we want carbon, we want carbon. You know, we want aerospace, you know, pre-preg all the way, full like, bull, like. But then there's certain cases where it's just like, it doesn't make any sense. Like it really just doesn't. So, you know, as a manufacturer, right? Like we pick the material obviously to make a living, right? And to provide the customer the perfect product. You can have a full set of carbon fiber, pre-preg, bodywork, and my bodywork right next to it crash. And I bet you my stuff will last because of the stiffness. Now there's a good chance it depends on how you crash and a million other options. But marketing gimmicks, it's a lot of it, right? So the best way to know and to judge a set of bodywork, in my opinion, is just mount it. You know, how long did it take you to mount? How well did it do? You know, everybody knows when you buy a set of bodywork, there's a chance you're going to have to grind some places off. Because if you put a pipe that's a cheap pipe that decided to do something that nobody else did, then you know,
or it's a custom pipe that only myself and the Westby team use.
Yeah, which is, and that's, you know, for us, you know, the worst call to get. Well, I have this pipe and it doesn't, like, your bodywork doesn't fit. No. I try to do it to, you know, we do it to the conformities of OEM, right? And we know a little bit about what's going on in the race world, so we do it with them. But, you know, I can't make a set of bodywork that works with every pipe. It's impossible. You know, Graves decides to do it one way, Yoshi does it another way. Hot Body, you know, well, not Hot Bodies, whatever it is, that some other company comes around and does it a different way. I can't make 3 different lowers. It's just, you know, we used to say at the shop, it's like, well, go send your bodywork to Graves and tell them to make a pipe that works with our bodywork, because that's what you're asking us to do. Send us a pipe so we make it to theirs. Like,
oh, just fix it in the post. Just have your painter deal with it.
Yeah. Just cut a hole and leave the oil on the ground. Like, just remove those safety features that we put in. But marketing gimmick, boom.
Oh,
yeah.
So all that effort of laying up in the molds, and you have your what do you call them? What do you call your guys?
Laminators. Yep.
Yeah. So why not just like spray kitty hair into the mold, dude? Just
so that's Chopmat is typically what it's called. It's polyester based, so it's the way it's held together is there's a binding agent, and then the polyester breaks it down, and then it kind of goes from look like a hairy mess to a sticky hairy mess. It doesn't work for us, and it stinks. It's not work to us. We don't like working with it, and it's, you have in the composites world, you have the guys who won't touch it and the guys who won't touch anything other than that, right?
Like the sidecar people, right? The sidecar people, the people that build that kind of stuff, and the dudes that make the trikes out of the gold wings, like they do that, right?
The trike guys, yeah, because they're mass producing, and that's the quick way of mass producing. And they can get a product that's black gel coated and that looks pretty good, and you get shoved on a bike and you go to town. The guys in sidecar racing, they actually don't use a lot of Chopmat.
No.
What I've seen haven't used a lot. In some cases, yes, that's usually lower tier stuff. Some of the old stuff, obviously, because Chopmat has been around for a lot longer than a lot of other things, and is it's a lot easier for somebody to go from not having any experience at Chopmat to having no experience to what we do, right? It's not easy. Like I've done some fiberglass work, because I got to know what these guys do, and I'll tell you, I'm not. That is not my future as an everyday thing at the shop, but it ain't easy. Like it's meticulous. It's an art.
Well,
it's an art.
I told you, like that dude made me make a set of lowers, and I was never gonna.
Hey, you learn real quick. You don't want to be doing that, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to work in the automotive industry, and I went to school to UTI, not a urinary tract infection, but Universal Technical Institute, right? I went for a 6-month span. I did pretty good, and then one day I realized I love cars, but I'm gonna really hate cars after this. Now, I think you could reverse that story and say, Fred, you really like motorcycles. Why did you get into the business? Well, all right, I'm not foolish. I didn't listen to myself the first time I had the epiphany. But now when you look at it, okay, I'm a little bit more intelligent, a little bit older, hopefully wiser. But it is what it is. I got into that world. But sidecars, you brought that up. I want to talk about that. Have you been on one yet?
No, dude.
Okay, so
like I've seen those things. Like, I mean, they got a little better the last couple of years, but man, like they still have, like, here in the States anyway, they have this reputation for being just like
outlaws,
steaming piles of
crap.
Like like I've seen them without the bodywork on. I'm just like, dude, you guys are riding on those things.
Oh yeah. So I'll tell you this. I'll take my passenger seat and make it available if you want to come out and ride one, because I was very fortunate. Obviously we're not far from Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, and there's a guy named Peter who had got me on a sidecar, and I'll be like, this guy's been racing basically since birth, right? Like he came out of his mom and was like, I'm on a sidecar and racing, right? So I had quote unquote retired from racing, right? Road racing or going to that because of my knee, and I said, well, look, if you need a passenger, I'll passenger. In the US, the word monkey is used, but they frown upon that in Europe. That people actually really don't like to hear that. But whatever, we'll just move forward.
I heard that on the movie On Any Sunday when I was like that tall,
It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I enjoyed motorcycle racing. Don't get me wrong. I didn't enjoy guys who didn't understand that I got to go to work the next day and that I don't want to get hurt, right? And I understand there's purists and
what about you race the little bikes? It's not like you're racing a big bike.
Well, I did a little bit of that too, but moving forward from that, all right, I wasn't just a pansy on the bike. I did some racing. I didn't do anything significant, right? Like I don't have anything stamped to my name. I think I got a couple podiums of some sort, but the guy took me on, and he's well known in Florida and actually in the sidecar racing world, Peter Essef. And I had a blast. Like it was cool. It was a lot of fun. And then, there's another individual by the name of Boris who came over from the UK, Scotland specifically. And he also made it possible for me to ride a little more. And then, I got an opportunity to go to Laguna Seca. And so the Arma did a round there one year. Okay. And I went on a really good bike, which I actually now own. And we tore it up. And I have a buddy of mine named Chase from South Florida. He went with me, and we have a ball. And I'll tell you, it takes racing from cool to this is a sport, because it's a team effort. Like if your monkey / passenger is not with you, you ain't gonna have a good time. And it's a pitch podge, right? You're almost in a car and almost on a motorcycle. I mean, you've got brakes for a car on it. You got 3 out of the 4 wheels. It's not a trike. And you've got a passenger, so it's a car, it's an automotive vehicle, and it can go really fast, and it can stop on a dime. and it can whip you off of it, and it can buck you, and it can do all the other stuff a motorcycle do. You're a little lower to the ground, but if you flip, yeah, you got a 700-pound item on you. But it is fun, man. I never had as much fun on a motorcycle as I do on sidecar. And I'll tell you,
dude, I'm gonna just have to take your word for it, dude.
Oh man, hey, we'll put you on it. What the thing that's important is to understand that like it's a team sport, right? And it's for fun. Like the U.S. will not be Europe. Like in Europe, it's a way of life, right? There is huge racing for sidecars. You know,
right.
The outfits are $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 vehicles. They're not cheap, right? They're not cheap when they're old. And it's a little bit of an artist way to build them. Like they're artisans that basically build them. The frames are not just pitch podge together. There's some geometry, there's some thought put to it. I just scratched the surface on it. I've been kind of rebuilding the one I have for a while now. And when I have free time, which is not very often, but it's, they're fun. They break down because they're just like motorcycles. Like they need to be kept up with, and they're a little bit more work because obviously you got 3 wheels and you got a lot more torque going on, and your contact patch is wide, right? You got big wide tires, so you need a lot of things to go right. So that's good times, man.
There's a guy that used to club race, and then he did the sidecar thing. I don't know if he's still doing it, but he went by the name of Johnny Kilmore. So
sounds familiar.
So Johnny would come out and he was at all the SRA sidecar.
Yeah. Dude, those guys are crazy. They put Hayabusa motors in those things, and that's like okay, yeah, 1000 cc cool. But when you go to Busa, they're nuts out there.
Yeah, on and off the track too, right?
Oh, I'm sure. I met a couple of them. They're a ton of fun when we were in Laguna. They're a ton of fun, but there's a sanity check that needs to come on to putting 1300. I think they're 1300 cc's, right? Something like that. That's a lot, You get on one and you find a newfound respect for racing, and it's different. And you got to remember, you're no longer this like tiny, thin object. You're double wide, right? So if you take a turn and you're not paying attention, your passenger's in the grass, and if you do a turn right, your passenger is actually floating, so they can get hang time, and there's some fun times. I'm very fortunate. I have a great passenger who comes with me. So she got on it. She'd never been racing a motorcycle in her life, and she came back after the first time, and you could see her eyes through the tinted windshield of her visor, and she was hooked. And now it's like you can't get her off of it. That's what she wants to do,
Wow, man. Well, you know what, dude? Like, this has been a great chat, Fred. Like, I didn't know how it was gonna go. Like, I don't really know you, so like,
hey, I could talk for hours, man. Going. I got plenty of time. It's more as your listeners actually want to listen. That's the bigger thing at the end of the day.
See, that's the thing. It's like, dude, that's 2 hours, man. I was like, wow. Whew.
Yeah.
It just went by.
So when people visit my shop or they get us going, that's time just flies, man. We're having fun.
Right on, dude. Well, it's been a great chat tonight. And dude, I appreciate you taking the time to answer all those weird questions and going into detail about the technical stuff about making bodywork. Kind of gives me another new respect for guys like you that are actually doing it. And you're actually doing it in the US, which, a lot of people may not realize that part of that cost that they're paying is that too, right? So
we're the only ones.
There you go. So, thank you for this. And it's been fun.
Hey, same right back at you. Whenever you want to do it again, my number, and feel free to make it happen. All right.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Anytime.